we're now going to talk about driving the customer connection through narrative persuasion. And I'm really delighted that we've got some amazing authors. The Power of Instinct by Leslie Zane, and Personalized Customer Strategy in the Age of AI by Dave Edelman and Mark Abraham. Welcome. For folks who have not gotten these books just yet, you will want them. For our two authors, they spent a long time thinking about how to connect with customers. Leslie is the founder of Triggers. We're going to talk more about Triggers and the book. A CMO advisory and first brand consulting firm rooted in behavioral science. That's also going to be important. And she has worked, as she details in the book, for a variety of Fortune 100 companies, Pepsi, Mars, Aetna, Kraft Foods, and McDonald's. Dave teaches at HBS. He's an executive advisor and board member to many brands and technology companies, and advisor. He's also an advisor to BCG. He was previously CMO at Aetna, as well as a variety of other companies here, and both of them have significant experience both here and abroad. Dave and Leslie, welcome. As I read these two amazing books, I really thought about, they come at it from different places, but they connect for me over that Maya Angelou quote. People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so, Leslie, I want to start with you. Your book really challenges the conventional wisdom, which would say, you got to find a way to persuade customers, get their attention, and persuade them. And you tell them to think differently.
Yes, I do. First of all, I want to thank you so much for having me today. Truth be told, we're going to have a big confession at this moment. David and I go way back.
Which makes it even more fun.
David directed me in the Harvard Business School show. And David, even though I love you very much, if you tell people what year that was, I will have to kill you. Okay. So this is really fun for us. So human beings are essentially unpersuadable. The conscious mind is resistant to change, it's skeptical, it doesn't want to do what you tell it to do, and yet we have, decades on ad agencies, marketing companies, everybody and his brother, including yourselves, trying to convince people to do what they don't want to do. And we keep barraging them with messages, thinking that at some point they will somehow submit. And I'm here to say that if we go through the instinctive mind, that mind that's always on automatically, that's kind of on autopilot, that we can latch on to things that already exist in the mind and have a much easier time to grow brands, businesses, our personal brand, even get your kid into Harvard Business School. So
95% of the decisions that we make every day, Leslie, you say are based on instinct.
100%. It's now pretty much acknowledged by scientists that the unconscious mind exerts the greatest influence on the decisions that we make. Basically, the human mind is like an iceberg, with the conscious mind above the waterline at only 5% of the decisions, and the vast majority of the influences of the decision-making process under that waterline, under that big part of the iceberg. That is the part that actually is driving our decisions. But yet, marketing spends most of its time up on that tiny little 5%, which doesn't make any sense. And that's why, essentially, you're kind of going up against a brick wall. There's a much easier way. Turns out that instinctive mind is much more malleable. And if you kind of latch on to things that already exist in the mind, our memories, you can make change so much faster, drive growth faster, and that's essentially what we do for our clients. We bypass the conscious mind, latch on to people's instincts, and drive growth for their brands and businesses much faster.
Dave, you say to the customer, it is all about you. We want you to have a focused, personalized experience, and you want people to have really the same kind of experience you had in putting solar panels on your house. I love that story. Can you introduce it for us?
Yeah, sure. So again, thank you so much for having me, and it is amazing to be on stage, two of us from the same class. So I have been looking at this whole issue of how companies use customer information since, I am going to say a date, Leslie, 1989, before the internet. I was a young consultant at BCG, and 3 different companies asked us, what can we start doing with customer information that we're collecting? Could we use it for loyalty programs, targeting marketing, customer service? I thought there was something there and came up with what we called segment of one marketing. And that was a platform for me. And of course, the internet happened, all kinds of new capabilities happened, and I was able to work on a much broader palette with companies on helping them do that. But it was still very much focused on marketing and more the advertising and the interacting with people to send messages. And now, with the capabilities of AI, there's much more experiential things that companies are doing. Of course, you every day decide to interact with brands who are using customer information about you. Spotify, Uber, a lot of the joy you get from that is because they know you. But it's extending to other kinds of areas. So the anecdote that Larry's mentioning, which is in the book, really turned my head about what's possible. So I used to live in Lexington, Massachusetts, and this was before COVID, so before Gen AI started going crazy. The town offered an incentive for us to get solar panels on our homes. You can get a rebate on property taxes. And that opened up an avalanche of marketing. Everybody was hitting every homeowner in Lexington with all kinds of stuff, whether it was emails, flyers under the door, direct mail, 20% off this, 40% off that. But actually buying solar panels is not that simple. There's issues about, do you buy, do you lease, what happens to the extra energy you collect, there are tax incentives. So it's hard to sort all of that through. One piece of physical mail stood out though, and it said, we've done the math on your home, it had our address, there's a personalized URL in this envelope that'll show you how you can save over 20% on your home energy bills by working with Sungevity for solar panels. Opened up the envelope, there was a URL, typed it in, and immediately saw a Google Earth image of my home from above with my roof having solar panels superimposed on it. Running down the right-hand side of the image was a calculation of how much energy those panels would generate based on my longitude and latitude, the east, north, south orientation of the roof. They even put in cloud cover, tree cover, as a possibility. So it showed how much energy it would generate. Then they went to Zillow, got the square footage of my home, and used that to estimate how much energy we would use on an annual basis. So they had the numerator and the denominator. It came out to 21.3%. And that turned my head. That was pretty amazing, personalized, really struck a chord. Then they said, click here to learn more. I click and I'm in a video conference with a young sales guy who sees that I'm Mr. Edelman and greets me right away, has all the information about me. Mr. Edelman, I'm delighted to share with you how you can save over 20%, and then proceeds to go through the different leasing options and buying options and dramatically simplifies the math. He also gave me the email addresses of 2 of my neighbors who had worked with them already. And we checked out with those neighbors how it went. They were quite complimentary, and we did it. We signed up, the math made sense, and we did not look at a competitor. It was such a powerful experience. And from that point forward, everything was managed through an app that helped us schedule things. We could track the energy we used. And when a squirrel ate through one of the wires, we got a notification. And we used the app to schedule them to come and fix it. And one year when we didn't get 21% savings, they sent a check. So it
Wow.
was quite an experience. So that's what we mean by personalization. That's not just putting somebody's name on an email. It's not just hammering away at somebody after they've bought a pair of shoes or looked at a pair of shoes with more images of shoes and retargeting them. It's changing the experience to get deep down inside, people realizing, you know me appropriately, and you're using that to add value. So that's what we're talking about. And lots of examples in the book of companies who are starting to do this as not just a marketing tactic, but a way of competing. Really thinking about their value proposition based on this.
Well, let's go to value proposition. Leslie, if we're advising promising companies, getting funding, they said the most important thing for us to be is unique. And you might say, you can personalize, we'll get to some of the tools, because I want to do that. But you have a contrarian take on that too. We should be unique. That's how we're going to find money. That's how we're going to find advisors. That's how we're going to find opportunity.
So uniqueness is one of the oldest rules in the marketing playbook, and it happens to be a rule that is going to set you down a very faulty path. In fact, I tell my clients all the time, there are 2 words I want you to eliminate from the language of marketing. One is uniqueness, and the other one is modernize. Those 2 things are literally the kiss of death. Why is that? Let's start with the fact that the human brain is hardwired to connect with the familiar. It actually rejects the unique. You know this from a baby. Take a baby out of its mother's arms, and it is going to scream bloody murder. Why? Because you've taken it away from it, the familiar face that the baby knows, and you've given it to you, who is a stranger to them. Let's also talk about the pandemic. During the pandemic, people didn't reach for the brands that they didn't know, or the no-name brands. They all reached for those familiar big brand names, and the only things that were left on the shelves were the no-name brands that nobody wanted. Because they gave us comfort and security. So we are hardwired to connect with the familiar. Yet we follow this uniqueness thing, and it makes us create things that are very alienating to consumers. So the new rule is actually familiarity is more powerful than uniqueness, and distinctiveness is best of all. Let's take the snow-capped mountain. So when I was working on Aquafina bottled water, I remember that somebody from an ad agency said to me, we're never going to put a snow-capped mountain on Aquafina bottled water because that would be generic. That would be a cliche. But our work had found that the snow-capped mountain had all these positive associations that already existed in people's minds. Pure, pristine, eco-friendly, water from the glaciers. Little people go to the top of the mountain and take glacier water and put it in the containers and walk back down the mountain. And like that's literally what people thought. And so I said, so why would you want to throw out that snow-capped mountain? It's so powerful. And why, by the way, would you cede that territory to the competition and let them own it? So distinctiveness allows you to take that generic snow-capped mountain, render it in a way that's distinctive to you, which they did, a primary peak, a secondary peak, a little orange sunrise. You're all familiar with the Aquafina logo? Sure. And that logo is theirs. Now they inherit and they ride the familiar neural pathways of all those positive associations, and they get co-opted back onto sort of almost like borrowed equity, back onto your brand. So now Aquafina stands for the best water there is, because they have perceived superiority from all those positive associations. And so the new rule really is familiarity is more powerful than uniqueness, and distinctiveness is best of all. So throw out uniqueness and use the term distinctiveness from now on.
The other term that I learned that I like a lot is connectomes. Love that. Tell our. I'm not spoiling the book by telling people.
No, not at all.
We use it a lot. What's a connectome?
Yeah. So the human connectome is the vast array, the vast neural network of wiring that we have in our brains that allows us to make connections. So when you think about it, the human brain is basically an analogic machine. We are constantly making associations. If I say hot dog, maybe you'll say mustard. If I say hamburger, maybe you'll say McDonald's, right? We make connections. So that is literally how our brain works. And by the way, that's why we have AI today, because the scientists finally realized that the brain is not a sequential machine like a computer going step by step by step, but it actually makes connections. And so when they finally realized that, they were able to create AI in a way that mirrors the way the human brain works, which is analogically. The connectome is basically the same concept, that because all of these different parts of our brain are connected, all these different wires are connected, you can go in there and you can pull out the brand connectome for a particular brand. So whether it's Pepsi or Coke or Morgan Stanley and Chase, this works for B2B, it works for B2C, it works really for anything. Former President Trump has a brand connectome. Vice President Kamala Harris has a connectome. Once you understand how the connectome works, you literally can analyze anything in life, your own brand, other people's brands, competitive brands, and really understand what are the drivers and barriers that drive choice. The connectome is calling the shots. You are not aware of any of this. It is all happening in your unconscious mind. But when you go to the supermarket, when you reach, does everybody here like sort of reach for their kind of go-to brand, stick it in the cart and walk out? You don't spend 3 weeks in there weighing the different, benefits of this brand or the other. You just reach. And that is instinct taking over. It is your connectome literally dictating the choices that you make. And I would say you don't choose your brands, your connectome does.
It's so provocative, and it's such a great way of thinking about things. Dave, you wrote this book, you and Mark wrote this book, really to answer some of those folks who say, how hard could this be? I'll empower people. I know them, they just bought black shoes, so I'll just send them all kinds of information. You actually told them they have to aspire to do certain things with customers. What are those aspirations?
Sure. I'm trying to find the connections to Leslie's side, and I think there's a complementarity in what we're talking about, because how you feel about a brand has a lot to do with the way that brand has treated you. And especially for more service-based brands where there's data involved, the way companies use that data can make a huge difference in your opinions. So in the book, we talk about 5 promises that a brand, if they're going to use customer information, 5 promises that a brand needs to keep to customers so that they don't come across as misusing information, being creepy, but actually adding value. So the 5 promises, it's very simple. First is you're going to empower people. You're going to enable people to do things they couldn't do before because of the way you're activating their information. The Sungevity example is really easy to explain that. So are things like using Spotify to discover new music. The second thing is you have to know people. You have to actually have data that you can use if you're going to be personalizing. And you have to get that data in a way that's not creepy, that people feel is appropriate. So I'll give you another good example on knowing. So I recently moved from Lexington to Cambridge, and when I did, Home Depot bombarded the hell out of me with all kinds of messages. It was just relentless, and I was just ready to turn it off. But then they asked me, what's your next project? And so I said, bathroom renovation. And then everything changed. They actually used that to start thinking somehow in their AI about what to show me. And as they saw what I did look at and what I didn't look at, it got more and more and more relevant over time. So it was clear they were using information, but they asked me. So that was a powerful way of knowing something about me. Then the third, after empower and know me, is reach me in a way that is not going to be overwhelming, not bombarding me. So one of the things that is a huge risk with AI is you can create all kinds of content. You can think you're creating content for everybody, for every occasion, and you can just hit them. So it was like Home Depot, after I moved, bombarding me. But less is more. And what we're seeing is more and more people are unsubscribing. And as part of this work, I wrote it together with the head of the marketing practice of BCG. They've done a survey of consumers around the world about their attitudes towards customer information. 70% of people are comfortable and appreciate when brands use their information appropriately. 75%, though, have stopped doing business with brands who have not used their information appropriately and who basically harass them or make them feel that it's creepy. So less is more. We found when I was CMO of Aetna that actually instead of sending people 12 emails a month, if we got it down to 4, they opened them, they had more impact. Then you got to show people something that makes sense for them in a way that's visual and engaging, that's relevant. Again, another example here from Aetna, people don't understand their health insurance. And we realized that most people didn't, and that led to problems. People would go out of network, they'd call the call center, they'd be angry, it would cost us money. So we found a service, it was called Sunday Sky, where we can create simple, personalized videos for every new member. So every new Aetna member gets, it's a simple animation. It's not very sophisticated, but it is personalized. It's your health insurance, who in your family is covered. Do they have a PCP, a primary care relationship? If not, here are 5 that are near you who are accepting new patients. Click here to make an appointment. So that is completely personalized. 70% of people watched a 3.5-minute video. Calls to the call center went down, satisfaction went up. It was a home run. So after show me something that's appropriate, the 5th is delight me. Make it better as you learn more and more and more about me. And Spotify, I think, is another just great example. As it learns more, Netflix, as they learn more about you, the experience gets better and better over time. But they're also constantly testing and learning and testing new things all the time. Every Netflix show has over 100 different trailer variations. I once tested, I went on my son's account and looked up the same shows as my account. He sees completely different trailers for the same shows. So the 5 are empower me, know me, reach me, show me, and delight me. And if you can do that, you are making an impression that builds a bond that I have a feeling gets into your connectome in a positive way.
100%. Can I
Absolutely.
add on to that?
Absolutely.
So I think basically the connection between our two work, we're both trying to connect with consumers, no question. Once you talked about the longevity situation where you got that direct mail piece and it sort of knew you on multiple levels. It knew your house, it knew your neighbors, it knew your energy consumption, all of that, and actually depicted your house with the shields right on it. I think what was happening there was that the brand connectome grew in your mind in probably a few moments. Yep. If you think about what most marketers do, they have this very formulaic approach where they kind of go down this funnel from awareness to consideration to trial. Honestly, I think that's like a figment of marketers' imaginations that we've created this funnel because we want to create constructs to help us. But let's face it, what happened in that moment was that in a moment, they won you over because they created multiple connections in your brain between that brand and your needs. Mm-hmm. And that is the secret to the brand connectome. So David has his 5 things. I have 3 things. The brand connectome is driven by 3 things. That 3 things are necessary to make a healthy connectome. 1, it needs to be large. It needs to be physically salient because if a brand has a lot of connections in your mind, like a lot of it takes up a lot of space, almost like a game of Monopoly. Whoever owns the most physical territory in the brain wins. That brand is going to be your instinctive go-to. It's going to be salient in your mind because it's got this large physical footprint, so you're going to think of it automatically. So large physical footprint. 2, you need to have more positive associations than negative associations. Negative associations actually help drive brands down, and all the brands that we work on that are legacy brands that have not been monitoring the instinctive mind have negative associations that have crept in, and those hold back growth. So high ratio of positive to negative. And then the third thing is you need it to be distinctive, not unique, distinctive. So large, positive, and distinctive. And you can actually do all of that in one fell swoop, throw out the funnel. They did it to you in that moment with Sungevity.
And Leslie, don't even get you started on satisfaction surveys. Talk about that. I love that piece of this as well.
So whether it's a satisfaction survey or whether it's, quite frankly, Net Promoter Score, or it's the traditional brand trackers that marketers follow their brands on, all of these are very top of mind attributes. They're actually not getting to the true drivers of choice, which are instinctive and implicit. So what we're doing in our work is, and on that very point, I have actually worked for companies that have 95% satisfaction scores while their businesses were going down the tubes, right? It's really easy to get a high score on a satisfaction survey.
And it's what everyone does,
And
right?
it's what
I think
everybody
every
does.
marketing firm should do this.
That's right. I mean, honestly, even the polls, even the presidential polls that we're listening to now, you know, how are each of these candidates on the economy, on jobs? All of those things those are lists of attributes. They actually don't predict what's going to happen in the voting booth. In the voting booth, people's instincts are going to take over, and there's going to be a whole slew of positive and negative associations that we'll learn about later actually influenced the election. I remember in the Obama-Mitt Romney race a long time ago, I think it was 2012, 2013? 2012, that all of the polls predicted that Mitt Romney was going to win because he performed so high on jobs and the economy. But at the end of the day, when people got into the voting booth, they felt that Obama connected more with them and cared more about them. And so that was like one of these implicit associations that hadn't been monitored in the surveys. And so obviously everybody was taken by surprise when Obama won Mitt Romney the most of all, because he thought he was a shoo-in at that point. So it's really interesting. These quantitative surveys, they can only tell you so much. They're basically getting at conscious attributes, and the true drivers of choice are baked into our instinctive minds, in our memories, in our brand connectome, the positive and negative associations that are much more implicit. Things like brand image, things like the personality of the brand, artificiality if it's in the food and beverage, a lot of kinds of associations that aren't tracked in those big surveys.
So, Dave and Leslie, I want you to advise that CEO who's listening to us, who has a product or service, and they say, I guess it's unique, I guess it's distinctive. Where do they start? If they've got some traction, they have some people that like their product or service, but they want to make sure they're marketing or reaching customers, engaging them, building a narrative and a reciprocal relationship with them. Where do they start, and how much is it going to cost in terms of investment of people, time, energy? Dave, I'll start with you.
Sure.
In addition to reading the book, that's where they'll start. Read the book.
Absolutely. So if you're starting to think about personalization as something that can make you distinctive, it really starts, though, with thinking about the customer. I mean, this is such an obvious marketing point, but it's amazing how many companies start from their product first, they start from the tactics first, but they're not thinking about what's going to drive value to the customer, that intrinsically that customer will say, I am better off than before for having experienced this. And today, with the tools that are available, you can change the nature of that value by adding to the experience using customer information. So are there problems that somebody faces in your category that you can resolve by making them better informed or tailoring things? Are there new ways to help people discover and find joy by helping them use the information they have, the things they've shown they've liked, to find things that they might be more interested in? Are there things that you realize you can offer that people have not fully understood to get the most value from, like health insurance, God forbid, that by personalizing the way you interact with them, they can actually see more value? So it's starting from the customer. And a lot of this stuff with AI and technology, people are chasing tools, they're spending a lot of money on data, but they're not starting from what do we want to do for the customer, not to the customer, for the customer. And so it takes from the top down. I found where it just starts in marketing and it's marketing tactics, you make some progress, but it takes a village to really change the value proposition. So it's about igniting a conversation at the higher levels of a company, or if a small company, just in your own mind as an entrepreneur, of saying, how do I change the basis of how people think about me, because I am helping them unlock value because of the way I'm helping them use customer information. A lot of the tools are actually not that expensive. A lot of AI capabilities are out there that you can stitch together. And my bet is, if you can think of something you want to help a customer accomplish, at this point, the tools are there to make it happen. It's really more a question of you focusing and really thinking through how you want that experience to work, and also how you're safeguarding and using data that you can collect. There's a whole conversation we can have just about
I thought
data.
that was a terrific part of the book. The other piece of advice, I think, Dave, that was really useful that you offer to folks is test and try. Yes. Sungevity didn't just happen. They didn't just roll that out after a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation internally. That took work. So testing and trying seems to be one of the pieces of advice you'd offer as well.
Yeah, I called up the Sungevity. I tracked down their chief marketing officer and said, how the heck did you do that? And she said, well, it took 18 months. They were constantly testing
right.
all kinds of different ways of the visualization, how to explain it, how to get the software to work. And so it was test and learn, test and learn, test and learn. But again, that also takes a different way of working, to not take 12 weeks to get something out the door, but every 2 weeks. And there's implications for how you organize to get that done that we talk about in the book as well.
Leslie, what do you say to that company that says, I don't know how to compete if I'm food and beverage? How do I compete with Coca-Cola to make myself distinctive? How do I compete with a behemoth? How do I become distinct? Where do I start?
Okay, it's a big question. So everything in my world is about starting with the brand. And in order to answer your question, I first just need to explain what a brand is, because I don't think we've talked about that. Think about planting a seed in other people's minds. That seed needs to grow into basically a full-grown tree. So I need to feed it nutrients, and the nutrients, the soil, the water, the sun, in this case, are positive associations. So I feed my seed, all of those things, it grows into a seedling, into a plant, and little by little, if you're all good gardeners, it's going to grow into a full-grown tree. Essentially, you can't have great share of market until you have greater share of mind.
Okay.
Though it's so simple. Brands are literally a physical growing thing in our brains, and they need to have more neural pathways, more connections. So that's the fundamental first understanding, foundational understanding you need to have. We are in the business of creating lots of positive associations, drowning other people's brains in lots of positive associations at the same time, all at one time, not different messages in different something else here in print, something in direct mail piece, something else in TV. The brain actually needs to receive multiple messages, multiple positive associations at the same time. So that's the starting point. But marketing today, honestly, is still on a hamster wheel. They do a little bit of insights work, they do a little bit of strategy work, they execute with their agencies, they look at the growth that they got and they're like, meh, that wasn't so great. And they go back and they do it again. And they never get to the unlock. And the reason that they never get to the unlock is it's what's hiding in the growth targets' brains, the people you don't have that you need for growth. Because stop spending so much time with your current customers. You actually need to get new customers, like Sungevity did to you. That's how you grow household penetration. You need to get those people to come over, and until you understand their implicit barriers, you will not be able to drive growth. So the first most fundamental thing is there's actually two big areas that I would tell companies to focus on. Do the proper diagnosis at the implicit level. We use a technique called memory elicitation, where you're actually combing through people's memories. Wow. Because what a brand connectome is the cumulative memories that have gotten glued to a brand over time in the mind. Big brand, small brand, it doesn't matter. As long as there's awareness, then there are positive and negative associations you need to understand. And then, so that's the first thing you want to understand is your connectome and the positive and negative associations you have, the negative associations that are holding back your growth. All you need to compare are two segments, the people you have and the people you don't. And that is a little bit different than personalization. Personalization is trying to get down to the individual, and there's tremendous usefulness for that. In our world, what we're trying to do is find out how people are alike. So we're asking a different question, not how people are different, but how are people alike. And we find that on an instinctive level, they're more alike than they are different. But they do have different homes, and they have different addresses, and so there's all of that. But in our world, in terms of brand messaging, we find that finding those commonalities is very useful. And then the second thing I need to do is once I have a brand connectome and I have some negative associations and I find out what those are, I need to take those down. That's the only way to grow. I got to get rid of those negative associations, and I do that by overwhelming the negative associations with positive ones. You never want to talk about, oh no, we don't have that negative association. That's just going to reinforce it. So those are the two big things. Diagnose your brand connectome, and you can look at the connectome of your own brand and the competition. So understand those positive and negative associations for both, because you'll find out what your competitors' vulnerabilities are. Those big brands have a ton of vulnerabilities. That's how disruptors come along and take market share from a big legacy brand. It happens all the time. It's why I actually have a business. And then on the other end is the triggers that overwhelm the negative associations with positive ones, like a snow-capped mountain, like a fresh cracked egg for McDonald's, getting rid of negative associations about having fake food. Those are the kinds of tools that you can use in my world to get rid of those negative associations and get the growth target to come over and convert.
You're getting a sense of the very, very rich content of these two books, and I'm going to give you a chance to go out and meet our authors and get your book signed. Dave and Leslie, what authors or innovators are you thinking about these days? What are you watching? What are you reading? What do you think folks who might be interested in these books would be interested in from that perspective? What are you reading? What are you thinking about? What are you watching?
Sure. Besides reading Leslie's book, which I have been, actually, I finished it, had it for a while. I'm actually looking backwards because I think we're at a time where big change is happening. And with the growth of AI, we need to think about what broader implications are and how society is going to manage at a time of big change. The election isn't talking about this at all, which is astonishing to me. I'm actually reading an older book by Robert Caro about Robert Moses,
The Power Broker.
The Power Broker,
Yeah, great book.
and how he reshaped New York and everything that went into making that happen, both positive things and negative things, but what it took to shape the whole landscape of New York City. It's massive accomplishment, massive change, but it took a lot of different elements and thinking and powerful individuals to make that happen. So I'm just looking at that saying, what could happen today like that, should it? Because I think there are just parallels at a time when we can see big change.
Wow. Leslie?
I am reading David's book because his book just came out, and I'm also reading a fiction book. Am I allowed to give a fiction
Absolutely.
author? Nikki Ehrlich. I think it's called The Thread. I'm blanking on the name, but it's a story about how everybody like wakes up in the morning and there's a little box on their doorstep and it has a thread in it, and it turns out. Have you guys heard of this? What is it? Is the what is it called? The Measure. Thank you. It wasn't the thread. It's The Measure. It's about that the length of the thread is a representation of how long you're going to live.
Oh my goodness.
And the question is, do you open your box? Do you not open your box? Who opens? Who? It's fascinating. It's beautifully written. She is a very young new author, and she's like the hottest thing. Big New York Times bestseller. I recommend it highly.
Oh, I love that. The books are Personalized and The Power of Instinct. Please join me in thanking and welcoming to the book signing, Dave and Leslie.